I walked into my own house and paused. There were claw marks on the wooden floor I'd polished with my own hands. A dog bowl sat where my wife's armchair used to be. Then my son appeared at the top of the stairs and said, without blinking, "From now on, Dad, you'll be sleeping in the basement. Max needs the master bedroom." Max was his dog, a golden retriever. My bedroom, the one I'd shared with my late wife for over 4 decades, now smelled like kibble. That's when I realized I wasn't part of this family anymore. There was a time, not too long ago in memory, when this house was filled with music, soft footsteps, and the smell of freshly baked apple pie. Marjorie, my late wife, used to hum while folding laundry. She always sang off-key, but that never stopped her, and I loved every note of it. We built this home together from nothing but dirt, sweat, and hope. Back then, we had a dream: to raise a family grounded in love, respect, and simple honesty. Our son, Daniel, was born in that same upstairs bedroom that now smells of dog hair. He was a loud, healthy baby, full of life, with eyes just like his mother's. From the moment I held him, wrapped tightly in that old hospital blanket, I knew there wasn't anything I wouldn't give him. And for a while, I truly gave him everything. I worked as a carpenter for nearly 4 decades. No vacation homes, no fancy toys, just honest work. I built cabinets and staircases and spent my evenings fixing this house, slowly turning it into a warm, safe place. While others bought flashy things, I saved for Daniel's education. Every night, Marjorie and I would check on him, whispering by the doorway as he slept, proud and grateful. Daniel was a good boy, curious, polite, the kind who said "please" and "thank you" without needing to be reminded. When he lost his first tooth, he ran into my arms and asked if the tooth fairy could build him a toy truck instead of leaving $1. I carved him one that very night in the garage. He still had it on his shelf well into his teens. We had routines, the kind that hold a family together. Saturday mornings were for pancakes. Sunday evenings were for sitting on the porch, Marjorie's hand in mine, Daniel leaning on my shoulder as we watched the sun set behind the fields. I taught him how to ride a bike, how to fish, how to patch drywall and change a tire. We built a treehouse in the big oak out back, the same tree he later carved D+M into, for Daniel and Mom. He cried hard when Marjorie passed. She'd fought breast cancer for 6 long years. Quietly, bravely. She tried to shield us both from the worst of it, smiling even through her pain. When she was gone, the house fell into a strange hush. No more humming, no more off-key tunes drifting from the kitchen. Just the tick of the old wall clock and Daniel's quiet footsteps. He was only 16 then. Too young to lose a mother. Too young to understand how much grief can reshape a person. I did my best, I truly did. I cooked, I cleaned, I worked overtime so he could keep his spot at the private school Marjorie loved. I hugged him even when he pushed me away. I forgave him when he yelled things he didn't mean. College came. He got into a good one, out of state. I drove him there myself in the same old truck I'd used to carry his crib home years earlier. When we arrived, he hugged me long and hard. "I'll make you proud, Dad," he whispered. And I believed him. He came back a little different, more polished, more confident, maybe a little less sentimental. But I didn't mind. That's what growing up does to a person. I was just happy to see him walk through that door, suitcase in hand. Not long after, he met Amanda. She was bright, quick with a smile, and always polite. At first, she reminded me of Marjorie, a sharp mind hidden behind soft features. When they said they were getting married, I gave them my blessing. And when Daniel asked if they could stay here a while to save up for their own place, I didn't hesitate. Of course, I said yes. What father wouldn't? Those early months felt like family again. We cooked dinner together, laughed over old stories. Amanda even asked to see Marjorie's recipes, and I nearly cried watching her knead dough with flour on her cheeks. Daniel fixed up the garage, made it into a workspace. I thought, maybe this is the next chapter. Maybe this house will ring with joy again. We even got a dog, Max. A golden retriever pup with a pink nose and oversized paws. Amanda had wanted him. Daniel, too. I wasn't thrilled at first. Marjorie had been allergic, but I warmed to him. He followed me around, sat by my feet while I read in the living room. I told myself this was what healing looked like. But as the months went on, something shifted. Slowly. Subtly. Like a change in weather you don't notice until your bones feel cold. It began with little things. My chair got moved from the window. My old toolbox, stored neatly in the garage, was relocated without a word. Amanda started reorganizing the kitchen, modernizing it, she said. I didn't argue. I just tried to adapt, to stay out of the way. I reminded myself, it's their time now. Let them feel at home. But deep down, I wondered, was I still part of this home, or just a guest passing through? Still, I clung to the good. I remembered Daniel as a boy, his hand in mine as we crossed the street, his proud smile when he nailed his first solo in school choir. I told myself he was still that boy. Somewhere, beneath the grown man's confidence and silence, he was still the child who hugged me in the hospital hallway after Marjorie died. I didn't want to believe otherwise. Not yet. The first time I truly felt it, that quiet, biting distance, was over something as small as a coffee mug. I have a favorite mug. Had it for years. Marjorie bought it for me at a roadside diner on our 25th anniversary road trip. It says, "World's okayest husband," and the handle is chipped just enough to fit my finger perfectly. One morning, I went to grab it from the cupboard, and it was gone. Replaced by a sleek, matching set of beige ceramic cups. I asked Amanda about it, as gently as I could. Oh, she said, not looking up from her tablet, it was cracked. I threw it out. You really shouldn't drink from things that old, Tom. I stood there, holding the cupboard door, feeling something inside me drop. She hadn't asked. Not even mentioned it. That mug was part of me. And it was tossed out like I didn't matter. I didn't say anything. I just brewed my coffee in one of the beige cups. It tasted bitter. It started to happen more often. My newspaper subscription was cancelled. Everything's online now, Daniel said, like I should have known. My recliner disappeared from the living room one weekend while I was visiting a friend in town. It didn't match the decor, Amanda explained. We're going for a cleaner look. I didn't argue. I told myself to pick my battles. But I noticed how I was slowly being erased. Little by little. Like I was a stain on the carpet that needed cleaning. And then there was Max. At first, I liked the dog. He was a good-natured pup. Followed me around, curled up by my feet while I watched the news. I even built him a small wooden bed, nothing fancy, just something off the ground to keep his joints healthy. He used it for a while. Then Amanda ordered a new memory foam mattress for him, bigger than my own. I laughed when I saw it. But I stopped laughing when Max started getting more affection than I did. Amanda bought him clothes. Real clothes. Sweaters. Rain jackets. Even tiny boots. He's our baby, she'd say, snuggling him on the couch I wasn't allowed to sit on without a blanket underneath me. Daniel, to his credit, chuckled along, rubbing the dog's ears. But sometimes, I'd catch him looking at me, almost apologetic, before turning away. Conversations started to change. I used to be included in dinner plans, shopping trips, even weekend barbecues. Now I was informed afterward. Or not at all. Didn't you get the text? Amanda would ask, waving her phone. I don't text much, I'd reply. You could have just knocked. "Oh, right," she'd say, then go back to scrolling. Daniel used to tell me about his work, his plans to start a consulting firm, his frustrations with his old boss. Lately, he'd become quieter, busier. When we spoke, it was quick, surface level. "Can you move your truck, or we'll be out late tonight?" I started to realize something: the house was no longer mine. It didn't feel like ours anymore. Not since Marjorie passed. And not since Amanda started moving things, changing things, calling it our home, as if I were a permanent guest. I was trying to stay polite. Respect their space. But it's hard to respect a silence that feels like a wall. One night, I heard them whispering in the kitchen. The kind of whisper where you know the subject is you. My name wasn't spoken, but I heard phrases like, "We need to figure this out," and "He can't live here forever." I sat at the top of the basement stairs, listening to the muffled hum of their voices and the scrape of plates being rinsed. They stopped abruptly when Max barked. I went back down before they noticed me standing there. After that, even the dog began acting differently. Amanda trained him not to come near the basement. "We're teaching him boundaries," she said with a smile. "It's good for his behavior." But I knew what it meant. She didn't want him near me. And then, one evening, I came home from a walk and found my bedroom door shut. Locked. A new sign hung on the knob, one of those novelty wooden plaques: "Max's room, no humans allowed." At first, I thought it was a joke. I chuckled, tried the knob again. Still locked. Then I noticed my belongings, my shaving kit, my slippers, my reading glasses, stacked neatly outside the door in a cardboard box. I carried the box down to the basement in silence. Daniel didn't say anything that night. Amanda didn't either. They both acted like nothing had changed. I sat on the edge of the old fold-out bed downstairs, staring at my own belongings, and remembered the day Marjorie and I moved in. We hadn't even bought curtains yet, just sheets over the windows and boxes everywhere. But we were young, and in love, and full of dreams. She once said to me, "Tom, this house will always be a place of warmth." I wonder what she'd say now. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were stressed. Maybe they needed space. Maybe I was just old-fashioned, too sentimental. But in my gut, I knew it was more than that. It wasn't just about space. It was about importance. And somewhere along the way, I had become unimportant. The worst part wasn't losing my room. It was how easy it was for them. No conversation. No apology. Just a box of my belongings in the hallway and a sign on the doorknob like it was some sort of joke. "Max's room, no humans allowed." They even laughed when Amanda hung it up. I heard it from the basement. Daniel chuckled. I'll never forget that sound. It wasn't cruel exactly. Just careless. Like I was an afterthought in my own life. 2 days later, they hosted a small gathering. A few friends from Daniel's office, Amanda's sister and her husband, some neighbor from down the block. I wasn't invited, not really. Amanda mentioned it in passing, "We're having a few people over Saturday night. You don't mind, do you?" I said no. Of course I didn't mind. I didn't realize they meant I wasn't supposed to be there. I came upstairs that evening wearing a clean shirt and slacks, ready to greet people. Daniel met me at the top of the stairs. "Dad," he said, putting a hand on my chest, "do you think maybe you could give us a little space tonight? Amanda's sister brought her friend, and, well, it's a tight crowd." I looked past him. I saw people laughing in my living room, drinks in hand, standing on the rug Marjorie chose. Max was there too, wearing a bow tie, getting pats and praise like he was the host. I nodded and went back downstairs. But I didn't close the door all the way. I sat on the steps just low enough to be hidden, just high enough to hear. Someone asked about the house. Amanda answered. "Oh, it's ours now, pretty much. Daniel's father is just, hanging on. You know how that is. The group laughed. A short, casual sound. It stung more than a slap. Is he okay? Someone asked. Amanda snorted. He talks to himself a lot. Keeps asking about the old bedroom. I think he's getting confused. Another laugh. Daniel didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't say, "Hey, that's my dad. Show some respect." He just sipped his drink and looked away. I went back to the basement and didn't come out for the rest of the night. The next morning, Amanda said nothing. Daniel avoided eye contact. No one apologized. No one even mentioned it. A few days later, I walked into the backyard and found Amanda and her sister with a tape measure. They were measuring the garden bed Marjorie planted. The one with the rosebush we'd brought back from our honeymoon in Savannah. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Oh," Amanda said cheerfully, thinking of putting in a hot tub. "This whole space could be so much more fun, you know? The garden's cute, but it's kind of outdated." I stood there, my hands in my pockets, trying to remember the last time someone asked me what I thought. "You know," I said, keeping my voice steady, "Marjorie planted that with her bare hands after chemo. She said it helped her feel alive." Amanda blinked. "Oh, well, I mean, we didn't know that." Daniel came out a moment later. "It's just a garden, Dad. Don't be so dramatic." I didn't reply. I just turned and walked back into the house. That night, I opened a drawer in the basement I hadn't touched in years. Inside were old photographs, our wedding, Daniel's first birthday, Marjorie's smile in every season. I found the letter she'd written me when she started treatment, the one I couldn't bring myself to read until after she passed. I read it again, now. And one line stayed with me: "If anything happens to me, promise me you won't let this house forget us." I realized I'd already failed her. The house didn't remember us. Not anymore. It remembered Max. It remembered Amanda's Instagram-perfect decor. But not the warmth we'd built. Not the dreams we'd shared. The attic still held Marjorie's shawls, her recipe cards, her favorite teacups. But no one went up there. No one cared. And maybe, worst of all, Daniel didn't even notice the difference. The man I raised, the boy who once cried when he broke a bird's wing and made me drive him to the vet, he was gone. Replaced by someone who looked like him but carried no weight in his words, no roots in his heart. I kept to myself more after that. I started noticing the things I hadn't wanted to see. How Amanda rolled her eyes whenever I spoke. How Daniel checked his watch every time I asked about his day. How no one ever asked me what I needed. I didn't know what to call it then, this creeping disconnection. But now I do. It was betrayal. Not loud. Not violent. Just slow. Subtle. Like a leak in the roof that ruins everything while you sleep. And by the time you notice the damage, it's already soaked through. I found the envelope by accident. It had fallen between the cushions of the living room couch, the couch I was no longer welcome to sit on. It was addressed to Daniel, from a local law office. I wouldn't have opened it if it hadn't already been torn at the corner. Curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a flyer and a note: "Thank you for considering our estate planning services. We look forward to assisting you with the transition." Estate planning? I stood there, envelope in hand, my throat dry. Transition to what? I waited until the next morning to ask Daniel about it. We were alone in the kitchen, the sun barely over the fence line, the dog asleep in my old recliner, now relocated to the sunroom. I placed the envelope on the table gently, like I was handling something dangerous. "You get something from a lawyer?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Daniel glanced at it. "Oh, that. Just some information I asked for." About estate planning? He shrugged. Amanda and I are just thinking ahead. You know, being proactive. I stared at him. Proactive, about my estate? Daniel sipped his coffee. Dad, you're not getting any younger. We thought it might make sense to start preparing. Amanda read that it's better to sort these things before there's an emergency. There was no malice in his tone. But there was no warmth either. I already have a will, I said quietly. He didn't look up. It's probably outdated. We just want to make sure everything is smooth when the time comes. When the time comes. That phrase stuck in my ribs like a broken rib. He was talking like I was already gone. Later that day, I overheard them again. This time in the garage. I had gone to grab a wrench but stopped just outside the door when I heard Amanda say, "We need him to sign something soon. If the house is in our name, we could finally refinance and maybe get that extension built." Daniel muttered something I couldn't hear. "I know he's your dad," Amanda continued, "but he's not using the space. Half the house is wasted. He's living like a hermit down there. It's time. Time." Everyone seemed so sure that it was time, for me to disappear, for my life to shrink into the basement, for the home Marjorie and I built to become their playground. I walked back to the basement in a daze. Sat on the edge of my bed, hands in my lap, the sounds of the house above feeling louder than usual. I looked around the basement, my exile. The cracked cement floor, the single lamp, the boxes of memories I'd been too afraid to open. I noticed my wedding ring on the nightstand. I hadn't worn it since Marjorie passed, but I kept it close. Sometimes I held it in my palm and just breathed. That night, I had a dream. I was back in our kitchen, Marjorie stirring a pot of soup, humming. The windows were open. Daniel was small again, drawing pictures at the table, asking if I could build him a wooden sword. I woke up crying. The next day, I started paying attention differently. Watching. Listening. Amanda left her laptop open one afternoon. I don't usually snoop. I respect privacy, probably more than I should. But something made me sit down and read the tabs she had open. Can you evict a parent who owns the home? How to transfer deed from elderly parent to adult child. Power of attorney steps for family members. I closed the laptop and sat very still. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It wasn't just rudeness. This was a plan. A deliberate, methodical plan to cut me out, of my own home, my own legacy, my own life. They weren't waiting for me to pass away. They were building a world where I no longer existed. The worst part? I had no one to talk to about it. Most of my old friends were either dead or in homes themselves. My brother passed away in 2016. Marjorie's sisters stopped calling after her funeral. I had Daniel. And now I didn't even have him. But then, there was George. George lived 2 houses down. A quiet man, always in his garden, always humming old country tunes. His wife died 5 years ago, and he'd become something of a morning fixture, always walking his dog past my house around sunrise. One morning, I joined him. Said I couldn't sleep. We ended up sitting on his porch drinking coffee. "You look tired," George said, handing me a mug. I nodded. "Feels like I'm living with strangers." He didn't press. Just sat with me while the birds chirped. Eventually, I told him everything. The dog in my bedroom. The whispers. The lawyer letter. Amanda's search history. He listened without flinching. "My son did something similar," he said quietly. "Sold my cabin without telling me. Claimed it was for my retirement fund. Said I should be grateful. What did you do?" He smiled. "I sold the house before he could and donated half the money to a rescue shelter. Told him if he wanted money, he could earn it like I did." I chuckled, surprised by the bitter joy in my throat. George looked me dead in the eyes. They don't think we'll fight back. But we can. And that was the first time I realized, maybe I wasn't as powerless as they thought. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. A week later, I sat Daniel down. We hadn't had a real conversation in months, not since before the dog took my room, before the whispering, before Amanda began redesigning the home like it was some kind of showroom. He looked surprised when I asked him to talk. We sat at the kitchen table, the one I built myself back in '92, now mostly used for Amanda's candles and decorations. "Dad," he said, cautious. "Everything okay?" I nodded slowly, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. "I just want to ask you one thing, Daniel. And I want you to answer me honestly." He leaned back, guarded. "All right. Are you and Amanda planning to take the house?" He hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it. A flicker in his eyes, a subtle inhale. "We're not taking anything, Dad," he said, too quickly. "We're just trying to prepare." "It makes sense, doesn't it? You're not going to be here forever." I stared at him. "No one's here forever. That doesn't mean you start rearranging the headstone before the funeral." He laughed, a dry, dismissive laugh. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is finding out you're planning my absence while I'm still cooking you breakfast." He looked away. "You're being dramatic. You put my clothes in a box. You gave my bedroom to a dog. You held a party in my house and told me to hide in the basement. And now, you want me to hand over the deed like I'm a dying man in a hospital bed." He didn't respond. Just folded his arms across his chest like a child caught in a lie. I shook my head. "Your mother would be ashamed." That got him. He flinched, jaw tightening. "Leave her out of this." "I can't," I said, softer now. "Because this was her home too. And she made me promise to protect it. Not from burglars, Daniel. From neglect. From people who would forget what it meant." He didn't say another word. Just stood up and walked out, Max trotting behind him. That night, I noticed the tension shift. Amanda barely looked at me. She passed me in the hall like I was a stranger at a bus stop. I heard her whispering in their room. "He's starting to suspect everything," she hissed. "Let it go," Daniel muttered. "He'll come around." But I wouldn't. I'd reached the limit. I didn't yell. I didn't slam doors. But something inside me turned cold, clear. The next day, I visited George again. I told him everything. The confrontation. The silence. The final, small cruelties. How Amanda moved my family photos off the mantle to make room for aesthetic pieces. How Daniel had started referring to the house as ours when talking to their friends. George just nodded. "You know what you need to do." I did. He gave me the number of his lawyer, a quiet man named Arnold who had helped George rewrite his will. That afternoon, I made the call. Booked an appointment. Gathered the documents I'd kept in a safe under the basement stairs, the deed, the old will, Marjorie's letter, even the first photo of us standing in front of the newly built house, paint still fresh. Before I left, I stopped in what used to be my bedroom. The door was open. Max was sprawled across the bed, drooling on the comforter. There was a half-eaten bone where Marjorie used to keep her Bible. I didn't say anything. Just closed the door gently. The lawyer's office was quiet. Clean. Arnold was older, like me. His handshake was firm, his eyes kind. "I've helped a few folks like you lately," he said. "Seems like this kind of thing's becoming more common." I explained my situation. Laid it all out. He listened, nodded occasionally, took notes. I want to change the will, I said firmly. Remove Daniel. Remove Amanda. I don't want them touching this house after I'm gone. Understood, he said. Do you have someone else in mind? I nodded. My neighbor. George. And his daughter. They've shown me more kindness in the past year than my son has in 10. We drafted everything. Included a clause: if the will was contested, the entire estate would be liquidated and donated to the local veterans' home and a hospice foundation, both places Marjorie once supported. Arnold looked at me, pen in hand. Are you sure? I didn't hesitate. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it to protect what matters. When I left the office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Peace. It wasn't joy. It wasn't revenge. It was the calm of knowing you've drawn a line. That you've stopped being the doormat. That you've decided you're worth more than how you've been treated. I walked home slower than usual, letting the breeze brush through my thinning hair. Marjorie would have teased me about needing a hat. At the mailbox, I saw Amanda peeking through the curtain. She looked nervous. Good. Let them wonder. Let them feel, for once, what it's like to not be in control. Because I was done being quiet. Arnold had me come back 2 days later to finalize everything. The office was tucked between a bakery and a dentist's office, quiet and unassuming, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking. But inside, it felt safe. Private. The walls were lined with books, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Ready? Arnold asked, sliding the folder toward me. I sat down, hands resting on the leather armrests, fingers slightly trembling. Not from fear. Just the weight of the moment. I've never done something like this before, I said softly. He smiled kindly. It's not easy. But it's yours to do. The folder contained every detail. The property transfer. The no contest clause. The statement revoking all prior wills. And the new beneficiary, George, and by extension, his daughter Olivia, who'd grown up helping Marjorie in the garden and now worked as a caregiver for the elderly. I want them to have this house, I told Arnold. They'll respect it. Not just the walls and floors, but the soul of it. He nodded. It's a good plan. Legally airtight. If they try to fight it, they lose everything. That was important to me. Not because I wanted to punish Daniel and Amanda. But because I knew the kind of people they were now. They'd fight over scraps if they thought they were owed. I wanted to make sure there was nothing left for them to claw at. Sign here, Arnold said. My pen hovered for just a second. Not out of doubt, but grief. Grief for the man I thought Daniel would become. Grief for the father I used to be, the one who believed that love alone would be enough to keep a family whole. I signed. When it was done, Arnold slid the documents into a thick envelope. I'll keep copies. You keep these somewhere safe. Tell someone you trust. I already had someone in mind. That evening, I invited George over. We sat on the porch, two old men with coffee mugs and quiet understanding. I made it official, I said, tapping the envelope. He raised his eyebrows. You sure? More sure than I've been about anything in years. I handed him the envelope. Keep this for me. If anything happens, you know what to do. He took it, didn't ask questions. I don't want them to find it. Not until it's time. George nodded, eyes serious. They won't. We sat there for a long time. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting golden shadows across the lawn. I saw Olivia through the window next door, helping her mother with the dishes. That house had real warmth. It reminded me of how mine used to feel. I should be angry, I said aloud. But mostly, I just feel tired. George looked over at me. You did right. They treated you like a burden. You reminded them you were a man. I didn't reply. Just sipped my coffee and let the silence speak for me. Inside my house, I heard laughter. Amanda's voice, high-pitched and mocking. Daniel mumbling in agreement. Max barked. I didn't go in right away. Instead, I walked the edge of the garden. Marjorie's garden. Her roses were blooming. A few had started to wither, but some were still vibrant, like little defiant hearts refusing to fade. I bent down and touched the petals. I kept my promise, I whispered. The next few days passed quietly. Amanda was planning a brunch, something important, judging by how many bags of groceries she brought in. Daniel barely looked at me. I think he sensed the shift. I was no longer the silent, soft-spoken man in the basement. There was something in my eyes he didn't understand anymore. And maybe that scared him. One night, as I was locking up, Amanda stopped me in the hallway. "Tom," she said, overly sweet, "have you thought any more about the paperwork we mentioned? Just getting things in order?" I stared at her, deadpan. "I did, actually." Her face lit up, too quickly. "Really?" "I spoke to my lawyer. Got everything signed." Her smile faltered just a fraction. "Oh. Well, that's great." "It is," I said, walking past her. "Sleep well." In the basement that night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Because now, everything was in place. I had no more doubts. No more guilt. I had tried, truly tried, to believe in Daniel's goodness. But some people don't find their way back. And you can't wait forever hoping they will. The will wasn't revenge. It was release. And now, all I had to do was wait. It was the lock that finally broke me. Not a shout, not a slap, not even a cruel word. Just the simple, metallic sound of a deadbolt turning where it had never existed before. I came back from the grocery store, just a few things I liked to keep downstairs: tea, canned soup, a loaf of rye bread. As I reached the back door, my key didn't turn. I tried again. Jiggle, press, twist. Nothing. I went around to the front, let myself in through the main entry, and made my way to the basement door. There, right at eye level, gleaming in the hallway light, was a new lock. A deadbolt. Shiny. Freshly installed. I stood there staring at it, groceries still in hand. Amanda walked by, pretending not to notice. But the smirk tugging at her lips gave her away. "Did you change the lock?" I asked. She didn't stop walking. "It's just for safety," she called back. "We had a delivery the other day and the door was left open. It's just a precaution." I turned to Daniel, who'd come out of the den holding Max. "Did you approve this?" He looked uncomfortable, but nodded. "It's for everyone's protection, Dad. We don't want strangers wandering in." "It's a private home," I said, my voice low. "Not a hotel." He shrugged. "It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal." I went back to the kitchen, stood by the sink for a long time, hands gripping the counter. My tea bags were in that basement. My winter coat. My shaving kit. My photo albums. My wife's letters. All locked away. That night, I sat in the guest chair in the sunroom and stared at the ceiling, the sounds of laughter echoing from the upstairs hallway. Amanda's voice. Daniel's voice. Max barking. Doors opening, closing, opening again. I was a stranger in my own house. But strangers don't stay forever. The next morning, I packed a small duffel bag. I didn't need much. Just a change of clothes, some toiletries, and one small wooden box, the one Marjorie had given me for our 10th anniversary. Inside were photos, her last note, and the first ring I ever gave her, a simple silver band I could only afford by pawning my father's watch. I walked across the lawn and knocked on George's door. He didn't ask anything. Just moved aside and let me in. We sat in the kitchen while Olivia poured coffee. "They locked the basement," I said. George shook his head. "You staying here tonight? If you'll have me." He nodded. "You know we will." I stayed in their guest room that night. Small, but warm. Olivia brought extra blankets. George left the hallway light on like I was family. It felt more like home than anything I'd known in months. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, feeling years pressing down on my chest. Marjorie would have known what to say. She'd have told me to speak up sooner, to protect my heart, not just the walls. In the morning, I dressed carefully. Pressed shirt. Belt. Clean shoes. I even shaved. I looked in the mirror and reminded myself, this was my house. My life. My legacy. Amanda was hosting a brunch that afternoon. Some social media thing, a dog moms of the neighborhood mixer, she called it. I wasn't invited, of course. But that didn't matter. I was going. I walked up the front steps, past the women in sunglasses and floral blouses, past Max in his ridiculous bowtie, past Amanda who froze mid-laugh when she saw me. "Dad, what are you?" I didn't stop. Just raised a hand. "Not now." Daniel stood in the hallway, confused. "What's going on?" I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folder. Laid it flat on the dining table. Every woman at the brunch went silent. "This," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is a copy of my revised will. And this," I held up a flash drive, "is a video recording of the lawyer explaining every detail, including the no contest clause." Amanda blinked. You can't just barge in here." "I built this house," I said, eyes locked on hers. "I paid every mortgage, patched every leak, painted every wall. This home was mine and Marjorie's. You locked me out of it." Daniel stepped forward. "Dad, please, don't do this here." "I begged for respect," I said. "You gave my room to a dog. You tried to manipulate me into signing over everything. You lied. You laughed at me. You locked me out of my own life." I turned to the brunch guests, who were now wide-eyed and silent. "Well," I said, voice calm, "now you know." I turned and left. Didn't slam the door. Didn't raise my voice. Just walked out with dignity, the kind that only comes when you've finally stopped begging to be seen. Back at George's, Olivia was waiting with tea. She didn't ask how it went. She didn't need to. I sat down, took a long breath, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled. The funny thing about truth is, once it's out, you can't shove it back in. Word spread faster than I expected. By evening, I'd gotten 2 phone calls from old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. One of them, Doug, who used to work maintenance with me at the hardware store, just said, "Heard what you did. Proud of you." By morning, the neighborhood had changed. It wasn't in the trees or the air. It was in the way people looked at me. Nods from the mailman. A longer than usual wave from Mrs. Adler across the street. Even the guy who jogged with headphones on paused long enough to give me a thumbs up. The silence inside Daniel and Amanda's house, however, was deafening. They didn't call. Didn't text. I wasn't surprised. I imagined Amanda was fuming, pacing in her slippers, Googling ways to reverse a will. I pictured Daniel just sitting there, confused, unsure whether to be angry, ashamed, or both. But it wasn't over yet. Amanda had organized one last event. A big dinner party, her birthday. Fancy invitations. Catered food. Daniel had posted about it online. George showed me on his phone. "Think you're invited?" he asked with a wry smile. I smiled back. "Doesn't matter. I'm going." He nodded. "Good." I dressed in my best. Navy blazer. White button-down. Shoes Marjorie once complimented on our anniversary. I walked across the lawn just after the guests had arrived. The house was full of laughter and soft jazz music. Amanda opened the door. She looked stunned. "Tom." "Evening," I said. Daniel appeared behind her, his face pale. "Dad, please." I held up my hand. "I won't stay long." Guests were already watching. Whispering. I recognized some old neighbors, Amanda's co-workers, a few who knew me from church. I stepped inside. The room went quiet. "I won't ruin your party," I said. "But I need to say something. Not to cause drama. Just to set things straight." Amanda's mouth opened, but Daniel stopped her. "Let him talk," he said quietly. I turned to the guests. "My name is Tom," I began. "I built this house with my wife, Marjorie, over 40 years ago. We raised our son here. We planted trees, hosted holidays, laughed and cried inside these walls." I looked at Daniel. "When my wife died, I kept going, for him. I worked. I cooked. I opened my doors when he needed help." I turned to Amanda. "And then, slowly, I became invisible. My room was given to a dog. My photos were boxed up. My things were thrown away. And when I questioned it, I was told I was dramatic. When I asked for respect, I was locked in a basement." I took a deep breath. "So I changed my will. This house no longer belongs to Daniel. Or Amanda. It will go to someone who treated me like a human being. Someone who remembered my name, not just my utility." Gasps. A few muffled whispers. Amanda's face was red. Daniel looked like he'd been hollowed out. "I didn't come here for revenge," I said. "I came because sometimes silence becomes a lie. And I won't lie anymore, not about what happened, and not about who I am." I walked out to stunned silence. No applause. No outrage. Just the kind of stunned quiet that lingers when a wound is finally exposed. Outside, George was waiting by his porch. "Well?" he asked. "It's done," I said. He smiled. "Bet you feel lighter." I did. Over the next few days, Amanda didn't speak to me. Daniel tried once, left a note by the mailbox. "Can we talk? Just the two of us." I didn't respond. He'd had his chances. Every morning. Every night. Every insult, every locked door, every moment I stood there waiting for the boy I raised to remember who he was. But he never did. Letting go of your own child is like amputating your heart, necessary, but cruel. Still, I slept well that night. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a memory being made whole again. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The house was quiet. Not the same quiet it used to be, the kind filled with the warmth of a late evening and Marjorie's humming in the next room. This quiet was still. Hollow. But peaceful, in a way I hadn't felt in years. Daniel and Amanda kept to themselves after the confrontation. No more forced greetings. No more awkward, sidelong glances. Just silence. I think they understood that something had shifted. That the line had been drawn, not with anger, but with finality. I stayed with George and Olivia a while longer. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Their home was full of life, even in its simplicity. Olivia made fresh bread one morning and offered me a slice like I was her own grandfather. George insisted on our evening walks, no matter how tired I was. And in those walks, I started to breathe differently. We'd walk past my house sometimes, and I'd look at it from the sidewalk, not as a prisoner trying to escape, but as a man reclaiming something sacred. The windows still held the sunlight the same way. The front porch still creaked in the spot Marjorie always avoided. But it no longer felt stolen. It felt waiting. The town, of course, was buzzing. Small towns always are. Some folks thought I'd gone senile. Others called me a hero. A few whispered in church pews about that dog woman and her scheme. I didn't respond to any of it. Let them talk. I knew what was true. One afternoon, I walked the perimeter of my backyard. Amanda wasn't home. Daniel was inside, but he didn't come out. I walked past the garden, which had begun to wither from neglect. The roses were fading. The soil was dry. No one had watered it since I left. I stood there for a long time, then knelt down and pulled a few weeds. Just enough to feel her presence again. I remembered something Marjorie once said, during her last month, when the chemo had made her weak, but not silent. I'd asked her what she wanted me to do after she was gone. She smiled at me through cracked lips and said, "Keep something growing." I hadn't understood then. I do now. Back at George's, I started writing again. Not stories. Just small reflections. A kind of journal. Memories of Marjorie. Moments with Daniel when he was still my boy, like when we watched thunderstorms from the garage, or the night he stayed up late helping me repair a broken fence. I didn't write to blame him. I wrote to remember the version of him that I loved. That version may be gone now, but he was real once. And he mattered. A week passed before I returned to the house. I didn't announce it. Just walked up the front steps, key in hand, like I had 100 times before. Daniel opened the door. He didn't look surprised. Just tired. "Hey," he said. I nodded. "Just grabbing a few things." He stepped aside. Amanda wasn't there. The living room was clean, almost sterile. The candles were gone. Max's toys were piled in a corner. I went to the basement first. Collected my clothes. My books. A small clock Marjorie had once given me, shaped like a sunflower. Then I walked upstairs to the bedroom. The door was open. Max wasn't there. I stood in the doorway for a long time. The bed had been stripped. The curtains drawn. It smelled empty. And yet, somehow, I felt her again. "I'm taking the room back," I said aloud. Daniel was at the bottom of the stairs. He looked up, uncertain. "You moving back in?" "For a while," I said. "Maybe longer." He didn't argue. He just nodded, then turned and walked into the kitchen. I didn't follow. That night, I slept in my own bed again. It didn't feel the same. The mattress had changed. The air was different. But it was mine. And when I closed my eyes, I saw her, sitting at the vanity, brushing her hair, smiling softly at me in the mirror. I whispered, "I'm here," and drifted into sleep. In the days that followed, I kept to myself. Amanda avoided me. Daniel said little. But the energy in the house was different. They were walking on eggshells now. And I no longer cared. I took walks in the garden. Repaired the birdhouse. Even started fixing the old porch swing. George would stop by in the evenings, sometimes with Olivia, and we'd sip coffee like old times. I wasn't the same man who first walked down to that basement with a box in his hands. I was something stronger now. Maybe not healed. But certain. And with that certainty came peace. The swing creaked as I tested the new bolts. Took me half a morning to replace the chains, sand the splintered edges, and oil the armrests. I hadn't worked with my hands like that in a long while. Felt good. Like I was building something that mattered again. George was watching from across the fence, holding his mug. "Looks like it belongs there," he said. "It always did," I replied, wiping sweat from my brow. Something had changed in me since that night at Amanda's dinner party. Not just the relief of speaking the truth. It was something deeper, a quiet kind of freedom. A sense that I didn't have to wait for someone else to validate my presence. I could choose to live. Choose to build again. That swing became the first seed of something bigger. It started with Olivia. She was visiting one afternoon, helping her father organize some garden tools, when she mentioned a woman she was caring for, Mrs. Peterson, 89, a widow with arthritis so bad she couldn't dress herself some days. "She's got no family," Olivia said. "And the facility she's in is cold. Sterile. It's like a waiting room for death." I looked around my house, the wide hallways, the empty guest rooms, the warm southern light spilling through the curtains. What if she didn't have to be there? I asked. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I've got space," I said slowly. "Rooms. A yard. A kitchen. No one really using it. Maybe it's time it meant something again." She tilted her head. "You thinking of opening it up?" "Why not?" I said. "Marjorie always said this house should feel alive. Maybe it's time to make that happen." The idea took root quickly. Olivia helped connect me to some local caseworkers, volunteers, and nonprofit liaisons. George drew up a few sketches for how to adapt the guest bathroom for seniors. We cleared out the rooms upstairs, the ones Amanda had turned into walk-in closets and reading lounges that no one ever used. Daniel and Amanda said nothing. But I could feel their tension. The more I took back control of the house, the more they shrank into silence. I didn't care. I was on a mission. We repainted the hallways in soft tones. Replaced harsh lights with warm ones. Olivia brought in comforters, pillows, curtains stitched by local volunteers. I moved the piano back into the living room, the one Marjorie used to play on Sunday afternoons while she sang hymns and Daniel played on the floor. I found a name for the project, Marjorie's House. Simple. Honest. Full of heart. By midweek, we had 2 elderly women scheduled to visit, just to test the waters, Olivia said. Both were quiet, gentle women who'd lost their spouses and been warehoused in facilities where no one knew their names. They sat on my porch swing that first afternoon, watching the birds. One of them, Helen, teared up and said, "It smells like someone cares here." That nearly broke me. Because she was right. For so long, this house had been treated like a commodity, a thing to be owned, flipped, or traded. But it wasn't just a structure. It was a memory. A refuge. And now, it was becoming something more, a second chance. Not just for me. For everyone. Daniel passed me in the hallway later that day. He looked confused. Disoriented. Like a man realizing he no longer understood the world around him. "You're letting strangers live here now?" he asked. "They're not strangers," I replied. "They're people who need a home." His jaw clenched. "And what about us?" "You had a chance," I said. "You chose differently." He didn't answer. Just walked away. I went back to sanding the window frame in the east bedroom. The same one where Daniel had once painted stars on the ceiling. There was something therapeutic about it, the work, the rhythm, the quiet. George dropped by with extra chairs. Olivia brought fresh bread and a vase of wildflowers. Helen and the other guest, Nora, helped prepare lunch. We sat around the table like a real family. Laughed. Shared stories. Took turns washing dishes. That night, I found myself sitting at the edge of my bed, whispering to the quiet. "We're doing it, Marjorie," I said. "Your house is coming alive again." And I swear I felt her there. Not a ghost. Just presence. A warmth in the air. A comfort in my bones. I wasn't lonely anymore. I had a new purpose. A new plan. And this time, no one could take it from me. By the end of the first month, the house was no longer silent. Footsteps in the hallway. Soft music from the kitchen. Laughter rising from the porch as Helen taught Nora how to play gin rummy. The front room smelled of coffee and lavender. My old record player, the one Amanda once called clutter, played Billie Holiday every evening. It felt alive. More alive than it had in years. More alive than it ever had with Daniel and Amanda in it. The transition happened slowly. One of the upstairs bedrooms became Helen's permanently. Nora took the one across the hall. Olivia helped them personalize the rooms, photos of grandkids, favorite quilts, books lined neatly on low shelves. The home was no longer mine alone. It belonged to all of us. George came by daily to fix little things, always humming under his breath. Olivia, between nursing shifts, brought donated medical supplies and check-in logs. I built handrails in the hallway. Installed new door handles that didn't stick. I hadn't worked this hard since my 30s, and I loved every second. The local community got wind of it soon enough. Some called to offer meals. Others dropped off blankets, chairs, magazines. We even had a retired music teacher come by on Thursdays to play piano and sing old hymns with us. Sometimes I joined in. My voice was rough, but the heart was still there. And the laughter. Lord, the laughter. Real, genuine, belly-deep laughter. That was the moment I knew, I had a real family again. Not by blood. Not by name. But by choice. By love. By effort. Daniel and Amanda stayed mostly upstairs now. The dining table downstairs wasn't for them anymore. I could see the resentment in Amanda's eyes, the way she winced at the sound of voices drifting up from the living room. But she never said a word. Neither did Daniel. They weren't angry because I'd ruined the house. They were angry because they no longer had control of it. And the house, it noticed. Even the walls seemed to breathe easier. The air carried warmth. The creaks of the floorboards no longer sounded like sorrow. They sounded like rhythm. One afternoon, as I pruned the rosebushes, someone called out from the sidewalk. It was a teenager, maybe 16. Ball cap, skateboard under one arm. "You the guy running the old folks' house?" he asked, half curious, half teasing. I wiped my hands. "We prefer to call it home." He grinned. "Cool. My grandma's been stuck in a place with bad food. Think you'd have room soon?" I handed him Olivia's number. "Have her give us a call." That evening, I found Helen sitting on the swing with Max, Amanda's dog, curled at her feet. "Looks like he's picked a new favorite," I joked. She patted his head gently. "He's not a bad dog. Just raised in a cold house." Her words hung heavy in the air. Daniel came home late that night. Walked in, saw Nora setting the table with placemats she'd crocheted herself. Olivia pouring soup. Me slicing bread. He didn't speak. But he stood there longer than usual. Watching. Not judging. Just watching. The next morning, I found a note under my coffee mug. "You were right. I didn't see it. I'm sorry." It wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting. I didn't respond. Sometimes it's enough that an apology was made. Sometimes it's better to let time handle the rest. That week, a local journalist came by to do a small write-up for the town paper. Called it, "A Home with Heart." Took a photo of all of us sitting under the porch awning, me in the middle, Helen on one side, Nora on the other, Max under the table. Daniel didn't appear in the photo. Neither did Amanda. But I wasn't looking for them anymore. The people in that picture, they were my family. They cared if I was cold. They listened when I spoke. They laughed with me, not at me. They thanked me for dinner. They told me stories. They remembered Marjorie's name. And in that remembering, they brought her back to me. One evening, just before dusk, Olivia found me in the garden. She held out a small, square frame. Inside was a quote, hand-stitched in blue thread. Family isn't who you share a name with. It's who shares your table. I didn't say anything. Just hung it by the front door the next morning. For everyone to see. It was late afternoon when the knock came. Soft. Hesitant. Not the confident thud of a delivery man or the casual rap of George's knuckles. This one had uncertainty in it. Like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they should be there at all. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. Daniel stood there. Hair uncombed. Shirt slightly wrinkled. He looked older than the last time I really looked at him, not in years, but in weight. His eyes were red around the edges. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. Then nodded. He stepped inside like a man stepping into someone else's home. Not his. Not anymore. And I suppose that's what this was now, not just a house he'd grown up in, but a place that had moved on without him. I led him to the kitchen. Olivia had just left for the day, and Nora was napping upstairs. The house was calm, like it knew something important was about to be said. We sat across from each other. I poured tea. Not a word passed between us for nearly a minute. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I don't know what happened to me," he said. "Somewhere between college and now, I just forgot what this house meant." I didn't respond. I didn't want to make it easy. He swallowed hard. "I remember helping you build the treehouse. You let me hold the hammer even though I could barely lift it. I remember Mom humming in the kitchen. She always hummed the same tune when she was making biscuits." His eyes glassed over. "I thought I was doing what was best for Amanda and me. Trying to build a future. But I wasn't building anything. I was just tearing down what you had left." He looked up at me. "I'm sorry, Dad. I really am." I let his words sit in the room for a while. Then I said, "You didn't just forget what the house meant, Daniel. You forgot who you were in it." He nodded slowly, shame coloring his face. "I know." I took a sip of tea. "So what now?" He looked at me, then around the kitchen. At the old walls. At the curtain Marjorie had sewn from scrap fabric. At the photo of Helen and Nora pinned to the fridge with a clothespin magnet. "I don't expect anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know I get it now. Anne. I miss you." That one hit harder than I expected. Because part of me missed him too, the boy version of him. The one who used to sit on my shoulders at the county fair. The one who cried when his goldfish died and insisted we hold a funeral in the backyard. But this man, this version of him, had done damage. And forgiveness, while possible, wasn't cheap. "I'm glad you came," I said. "And I believe you mean what you're saying. But I don't think we go back to what we were. I understand. This house, it belongs to a different kind of family now." "I can see that," he whispered. We sat there in silence a bit longer. Then I got up and walked to the hallway. From the cabinet drawer, I pulled a photo, one from long ago, before the walls were painted, before Max's fur was everywhere, before Marjorie got sick. It was the three of us, me, Marjorie, and a 7-year-old Daniel, standing on the porch with fresh paint smudges on our jeans and joy in our faces. I handed it to him. "This is who we were," I said. "Keep it. Remember it. And maybe, be someone that version of you would be proud of." He took it gently. Pressed his fingers to the frame like it was fragile. "I will." He stood. We didn't hug. It wasn't time for that. But when he reached the door, he paused. "I hope one day I can do something good with what I've learned." I nodded. "Start with being kind to someone who can't give you anything back." He nodded. And then he left. The house remained quiet for a few minutes after. The kind of silence that doesn't ache, just waits. I sat down in the chair by the window. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like it had every season since we planted them. Not everything could be repaired. But not everything had to be broken forever. Would you have accepted the apology? Tell us in the comments below. The banner hung gently between the porch columns, "Welcome to Marjorie's house," painted by Olivia's niece in big, cheerful letters. It was a warm Sunday morning, the kind Marjorie used to call shirt-sleeve weather. Sunlight poured over the yard, lighting up the trimmed hedges, the garden beds full of petunias, and the rows of chairs we'd set out for our small ceremony. We weren't opening a business. We weren't launching a charity. We were simply honoring a home, and the woman who gave it life. The first guests arrived slowly. Friends from church. Neighbors. A few town council folks Olivia had invited. Some brought baked goods. Others just brought their smiles. Helen wore a pearl brooch she said had belonged to her mother. Nora made lemonade. George wore a tie, first time in years. Olivia wore a simple white blouse and jeans, her hair braided back like her mother used to do. And me? I wore Marjorie's favorite color, a soft blue shirt she once said brought out the kindness in my eyes. A small podium stood on the porch, just beside the swing I'd rebuilt. I hadn't planned on speaking. But when Olivia nudged me, I felt something rise up in my chest, not nerves, but need. I stepped up, cleared my throat, and looked out over the little crowd. "This house was built with love," I began. "Nails and wood and long afternoons, sure, but also love." Heads nodded. Hands held coffee cups. The wind stirred gently. My wife Marjorie had a way of making every room feel warmer. Not with heat. With presence. She listened more than she spoke. She cooked when no one asked. She remembered birthdays no one else did. This house was her heart. I paused, letting the words sit in the sunlight. After she passed, it got quiet. Too quiet. And I made the mistake of thinking family had to be blood. That love had to be owed. I looked at George. At Olivia. At Helen and Nora. But real family is who shows up. Who stays. Who asks if you've eaten. Who laughs with you, not at you. Who sits next to you in silence just because you seem like you need it. There were soft sniffles now. Someone dabbed their eyes with a tissue. This house was nearly lost. Not to fire, not to foreclosure. To forgetfulness. But it came back to life. Because kindness moved in. Because purpose walked through the front door again. I held up a small wooden sign I'd carved myself. It said simply, "Marjorie's house, a place to belong." "Thank you all," I said, my voice low now. "For helping this place breathe again." There was no applause. Just quiet smiles. Respectful silence. Later, we ate lunch under the sycamore tree out back. Someone brought a guitar. A few of us sang. Helen danced with George, laughing so hard she had to sit down halfway through. Inside, the house buzzed with gentle life, no harsh voices, no closed doors, no tension. Daniel didn't come that day. But that was all right. Some absences make space for better things. As the sun began to lower in the sky, I stood in the garden. The roses were blooming again, not perfect, not flawless, but alive. Olivia came to stand beside me. She'd be proud, she said. I smiled. I hope so. She would, she said more firmly. We stood there a while, just watching the colors shift in the petals. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were done, I sat in the old rocking chair on the porch, the same one Marjorie used to sit in with her knitting. The wind moved gently through the wind chimes she'd hung near the gutter. I spoke aloud, just once. We did it, sweetheart. And in the rustle of the leaves, in the hum of the chimes, I heard her answer. Not in words. Just presence. The kind that fills a home and stays, long after the laughter fades, long after the photographs yellow, long after the people who built it are gone. Because this house, her house, would keep living. And now, it truly belonged to family. Real family.